Hello and welcome to more Grumpy Sound Guy content. I am your host, Mr. J.R. Everhart. I'm trying to pick all the pollen out of my eyes because my allergies are kicking my rear end, and it is once again like 816 degrees outside. I let the dog out a little while ago, and it almost just burst into flames. So we're in front of the green screen today, trying to stay cool. We actually had plans to do a bunch of stuff in the shop today, do some mobile stage maintenance and some stuff like that, and we've pushed all that out toward the weekend. We actually have most of this weekend off, which is wonderful considering that all of September is going to try to kill me because we are slammed up to our freaking eye sockets in September with festivals and all of the fall festival stuff and everything that's going on with that. We'll be wrapping up the whole Baltimore Orioles summer concert series at the end of September as well. So whole lot of stuff going on here, guys. A whole lot of stuff going on in the world of CLP audio and staging and the Grumpy Sound Guy. Today we're going to answer a question that was sent to me in a private message. I want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart for all the overwhelming support you guys have been coming to the table with just in the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's been absolutely humbling, and it's been super awesome, and you guys are bringing super, super cool topics and asking really good questions and just giving me a ton of stuff to talk about and to bring content that is relevant to your middle market life, whether you're in a band or you're running a small production company, or you're in a church situation, a church production situation. I absolutely love all your comments. I genuinely try to read every single comment. I try to acknowledge it at least with a heart or a like or something like that. Many times I will even reply to your comment with my comment. So if I don't get to you or I miss to hit the like button or to send you a heart or something like that, don't think that your comment fell on deaf ears, because it has not. I am reading all your comments, and believe me, that can be a time-consuming bear. So that kind of is what it is, man, But I'm doing my best here to run my own production company and keep up with all the online content as it absolutely explodes. So the topic today is... I had someone send me a message and they said, could you please talk about the sound guy getting a equal cut as the band, or rather that is not relevant, or that's not, in the best interest of the sound guy or even the band, from that perspective. So that's going to be our topic today. So we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a bunch of my own life experience. I have been in all those situations. I have worked in every kind of different pay scale and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to give you a bunch of hands-on, gut level, personal experience conversation with that. And we're going to talk numbers, man. We're going to throw some numbers out there and kind of give you guys an idea of what most sound guys are going to be. Generalized numbers. All these things are relevant. Don't you guys blow me up in the comment section about you make more or less, or my numbers are completely out in left field. Look, I'm just talking about the numbers that are relevant in the Mid-Atlantic, in the area that I work, which is predominantly Baltimore, Maryland, and Washington, D.C., and the metro areas around that. We do work out in Ocean City from time to time, Maryland, right on the beach. And we do work as far west as Cumberland, Maryland, in Morgantown, West Virginia, and in those areas as well. So we cover a broad area, probably about 150-mile, 200-mile radius of the metropolis of Inwood, West Virginia. We're 90 minutes from D.C. and Baltimore, so that puts us in perfect striking distance for both of those metro markets. So I bring a lot of that kind of different variable levels of experience to the table, because a budget at Deep Creek Lake in Cumberland, Maryland is radically different than a budget at Ocean Pines Yacht Club in Ocean City, Maryland, or even at Cancun Cantina in Hanover, Maryland, right outside of Baltimore, or what the budget is with our Orioles Summer Concert Series. All those things are radically different levels, because there's different levels of expectation, there's different levels of responsibility, and all that kind of stuff plays a role in what you should be getting paid. So before we dive real super deep into that, please subscribe to the channel. 93.3% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. Can you please just help a guy out? I mean, really, it doesn't cost you anything. I'm not going to send you junk mail. I'm not going to steal change off your dresser and get your teenage daughter pregnant. I mean, come on, guys. I mean, just hit the subscription button. Let's get those numbers where they need to be so it gives me the resources to be able to give you more of my time. And we're coming into the winter months here, just in a few months. We're going to be, what are we, like 2 months away from Halloween, and then that's going to kick off the whole Christmas season. I got tons and tons of stuff to say about working around the Christmas holidays and that sort of stuff. And there's going to be more time available in the slower season for me to post content. But I need your help. I need you to hit that subscription button. I need you to support this content and keep commenting on this, because that drives up the algorithm numbers and gets us in front of people who really want to hear and enjoy this kind of content. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to say from personal experience, I have been in situations where the band owned all the equipment, the sound system, lights, whole 9 yards. The band helped set up and tear down said equipment. And I was basically wearing a bunch of hats. I was stagehand, stage manager, production manager, trying to keep up with the maintenance and stuff on all the equipment. And I was, A2, A1 combined, front of house engineer for said band. In that scenario, the money would be anywhere from $150 a night to $400 a night, depending on how big the band was, what the venue was, that sort of thing. I think a safe flat rate number is probably around $200 a night. In that scenario where the sound guy really isn't bringing any equipment to the table, the band has all the investment. In that scenario, my agreement with those bands, like I spent 3.5 years with a corporate band that was like this, where I made that 2 a night, and then I got paid extra on the bigger events. Like if we did super huge, high-paying corporate gigs, I might make 3 times as much money as I usually do, because there's a higher level of accountability, a higher level of responsibility. Many times in those events, you got to load in at 7, 8, 9 o'clock in the morning and then sit around until 6 o'clock in the evening, basically just babysitting the gear until the band shows up, and we're actually going to play for 90 minutes, and then that's the end of the show, and then we kind of tear it all down. Now, that number, that pay scale will radically change if you are running a road crew. So let's say that same scenario, but now you have another guy that is a tech, or he is part of our road crew. Now, him and I are responsible for setting everything up. The band doesn't touch anything. So we're hauling their gear in a trailer they provided, and pulling it usually with a vehicle they provide. Sometimes I have provided that vehicle, but in that scenario, you're hauling their gear, you're setting their back line up, you're setting their sound system up, or you're advancing the show with a house engineer who is doing he's the liaison between the band and the house, because they have an installed system in the house. So you're the guy that is cooperating with him and giving him a left, right, and you're probably mixing on your own mixer into his rig, and it just kind of is what it is that way. That is a radically different number, because now the band is pretty much not touching anything. They're just walking in, playing, and leaving. Those bands are typically making, much more money, typically on the low end around $3 or $4, well, really $4,000 or $5,000 a gig is where those bands typically are, and they will hit the ceiling somewhere around 15 or 20 grand on some of their bigger corporate stuff. I know some of them bands even go out of town. They'll go to Spain, Jamaica. I've seen some of them go to the Middle East, and play and do high-end corporate things there. They'll travel nationally in the lower 48, even do stuff in Hawaii, that sort of thing. And those are gigs that are those $15,000-$20,000 gigs, plus per diem, which is money per day to live and eat off of. Those guys are also providing hotel rooms, and at least one meal a day, typically through the bar, from a rider standpoint, having a meal in there on the rider. So that gig is probably going to pay somewhere between $1,000 and $1,500, because you're the guy that's in charge of everything. Those gigs are few and far between, but they do exist, and I know people in that exact scenario right this very second, and that's kind of how they make their living. And those bands are typically playing 160 shows a year, 180 shows a year, or something like that. So there's not a lot of time, a lot of downtime. You are packing up and going to the hotel, take a shower, sleep for 4 or 5 hours if you're lucky, get back on the road and drive 4 or 5 hours to the next gig and do it all over again. It can be an absolutely brutal schedule, so make sure you got your man pants on for that, because there's a reason why it pays what it pays. And honestly, by the time you pay your liability insurance and you pay your fuel and other meals that you're going to eat, because you're going to eat, other than what the bar gives you. Sometimes you may be sick of bar food and don't even want to eat their food, so there's that. All that is, if they're paying you, say, $1,200, by the time it's all done and over with, the tech's pay is probably going to come out of that, which you're going to be looking at $200 or $300 there. He's somebody that's basically just going to set drums up and be grunt labor to get you in and out of the club. You'll be the expert on staff. You'll be the expert on site that speaks for the band and is well versed in system tech to be able to troubleshoot sound system issues, lighting issues, things like that. This is where, when I tell you guys that being a sound engineer means being all these things, being a sound engineer means you've done all the jobs. You've been to stagehand, you've been to A2, you've been at LD1, you've been at LD2, you know at least enough about lighting to set it up, troubleshoot it, program it, all that kind of stuff. You don't have to be an LD1 per se, but you need to really know what's going on with the light rig. If you're carrying a light rig, a lot of those bands used to carry sound and maybe just a couple trees on auto fade or something, nothing, big and crazy and elaborate. Some bands do carry big, crazy, and elaborate. It just depends, man. It really does. You may have to coordinate with production companies across the country because a lot of these gigs are fly gigs. So then you're just going to fly with a control package, which is just basically a mixer, maybe a mic package, something like that or whatever, your mics and DIs, and then communicate with an on-site, production company who is actually going to provide the sound system, provide all the incidentals on site, stands, cables, things like that. And you're going to fly in, meet that guy early, go through his rig, make sure everything's operational. So like I said, there's a lot of responsibility on that guy's shoulders in that scenario. That job probably takes up, 1%, 3%, somewhere in that ballpark of middle market, pro audio jobs. Those guys are typically got decades of experience, or they're just really, really gifted and talented and had a lot of opportunity to grow to just qualify for that kind of stuff. Because those kind of high-end corporate bands are very, very picky about who they get. But, on the other side of that conversation is it's hard to find somebody who wants to live on the road, 50 weeks a year. So sometimes those bands are dealing with guys that they could just get that can commit to the schedule. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen, you can't have a family that way. You either got to be divorced, your kids got to be grown, or you got to be young enough to where you don't have any of that going on, but still have a skill set strong enough to be able to do what needs to be done with these things. So there's that scenario. Now, I have been approached by bands. Last year, I had a local band here approach me to fill in for 2 or 3 shows because their sound guy was going on vacation. And they told me that, hey, our sound guy just gets a full cut of whatever the band makes. So, I think they were like a 6-piece band or something. So they just factored 7 cuts into pay, and he got an equal cut just like everybody else in the band. that may work for that guy, their regular sound guy, because he also gets to cash in on the bigger gigs, to where when you're asking for someone to come in and sub and just cover for him, then that's not really fair for me, because the gigs they were asking about were not great paying gigs, you know. So you're asking me to basically take a hit that your sound guy would usually take because he can make it up someplace else. I'm not going to have that opportunity to make it up someplace else. I'm just dropping in as a hired gun for 2 or 3 shows, and that's that. So in that scenario, you know, I have to charge a flat rate, you know. Walk-in flat rate is typically inside the middle market, and believe me, there's probably $100 or $150, you know, correction point, you know, over under, you know, for this number. But usually $300, $400 is typically where I am, depending on who they are, how close to home they are, how much of a pain in the ass they are to work with. You know, that's a whole nother thing. You know, I think I typically average 400 for walk-in stuff, but you know, I wouldn't be beyond taking a $300 walk-in if it was with someone that I really respect and enjoy working with, and I literally just walk in with an iPad or sit behind a console, mix, and don't have to set up and tear down anything. You know, that's kind of what that number is. Now, I know union guys that would argue that their day rate is 500-600 a day. You know, and I know other guys that are like shouting at their phone right now watching this, like, man, I'm making $75 a night, you know? Well, I mean, it's whatever works for you. It's whatever you agree to, you know? And that number drastically changes per your experience in the business, per your reputation. I've obviously got a very strong reputation in my market, you know? So when people call me, they know that we're not a little small ankle biter, one system working out of a minivan kind of company, that we're a bigger middle market company, and that demands, you know, more money. We're going to bring better gear to the table. We're going to bring more experience to the table. I'm going to bring staff to the table. I usually have at least 1 or 2 guys with me everywhere I go. I even take a guy with me on walk-in stuff a lot of times, just to have somebody to travel with, and you know, that sort of thing. So all that has to factor in, you know, to that number. Again, those aren't concrete numbers. I know guys making more, no guys making less. So take that for what it is. I don't think, in my personal opinion, unless you're working for a band that's regularly, and I mean consistently, making over $3,000, now that represents maybe 5 or 8% of the middle market. Okay, most middle market bands, and I have talked to people around different parts of the country, and these numbers are close. Most middle market bands are making between $800 and $1,500. That's probably 80% of middle market bands. Those are mainly B bands or low A bands. You can be an A band and only want to play out twice a month, and drive you down into the upper echelons of the B sector because of your availability. You know, A bands typically do at least 8 or 12 gigs a month. You know, if you're not on that level, you know, financially, I don't think it's a good idea for you to take a full cut. Well, if they're making over $3,000, it's, you can take your chances, maybe take an equal cut and be okay. Depends on how big the band is. I've seen 10-piece bands do this and no one's making any money. But if you're in that $800 to $1,500 range, you know, that is not a band that I would typically take a full cut. I would work for a flat rate. Like, this is my flat rate. This is what I need to make every gig. If we get gigs over, say, $3,500, then, you know, my pay needs to increase by this amount. You know, if we get gigs over $5,000, my pay needs to increase to this amount, because there's just more responsibility and there's more stuff laying on my shoulders in that scenario. So those are all things to consider when you're talking about, you know, working for a band for an equal cut. It's not something that is appealing to me, and never has been. I mean, I just kind of feel like there's too many shady guys running bands. I know a bunch of guys running bands that are as crooked as a dog's hind leg. They just are, man. You know, I mean, they just, you know, they're making double and triple than everybody else in the band. They're skimming money. they're the only one that really knows the true numbers of what the gigs are paying, and they can take advantage of that. Now I know a lot of guys running bands who take an extra hit because they're booking the band, or maybe they own the sound system and, they have a truck and a trailer to maintain and things like that. I get all that. You should make more money in that scenario. But should you make 3 times as much money as everybody else? I don't know. It depends on what your situation is in a band. I know some corporate bands to where there's like 3 original members in the band, and the other 3 people in the band came along later, and they were hired for flat rate salaries. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you agree to, that's what you agree to. You don't have to agree to any of this stuff I'm talking about. None of it. This is entirely up to you. I'm just kind of telling you the things that I have went through in my life, and the things that have worked well for me or hasn't worked well for other people that I know, and telling you how some of the bands that I'm surrounded by have done business over the years. And I mean, I'm going back, I've been in this business over 35 years, so I'm going back with some of these analogies, 20 years, with bands that have guys on salaries. If it's, if the name of the band is John Henry and the Funk Masters, John Henry's probably going to make more money in that band than anybody else in the band, because his name's on the, on the sign, on the merch. His name is on the band banner. He's the one taking all the risk. He's probably the guy that owns the truck and trailer and all the sound equipment, and all that kind of stuff. And the guys in the band are pretty much just showing up, setting up their gear and playing and tearing down and going home. And then John Henry is the guy left holding the bag to deal with the production people, deal with the nightclub, book the band, do all the marketing, argue with the promoters, argue with everybody in the band. I mean, he's the guy, selecting the song list and, stuff like that. So he's probably going to make more money in the band. And he may have built that band from day one that it's his band, and he's going to hire other people for flat rates. So he may hire, 3 guys to back him up and pay each one of them $250 a night, guaranteed. And there's going to be nights where he's going to lose his ass and ask himself why he's even in the music business. And there's going to be nights where he's going to cash in, But it's the John Henry band. So Mr. Henry is the guy that is making all the money, There's nothing wrong with that if you agree to it. It's all in what makes you comfortable. I know guys who seek out those kind of gigs. They enjoy those kind of gigs because it takes the pressure off. They know what they're going to make every single gig. There's no questions asked. They're totally okay with John Henry making more money than them, and it's all good. There's no pressure in their life. They know what they're going to make every time they go to the gig. There's not a question. And when you have that kind of consistency, it makes life a lot easier in trying to budget your money and, run your household at home and, all that kind of stuff, So that's just kind of the way that goes. As a sound guy, I would almost always regular work for a flat rate plus incentives. So, here is a flat rate, I'll mix you, like, let's say a nightclub comes to me. In fact, there was a beachfront club that actually approached me 3 different times last year. They had a bunch of turnover at their club, ownership changed, all that kind of stuff. I had an agent reach out to me. I had a couple bands that were friends with the new owners reach out to me. The installer, I think, he ended up reaching out to me or whatever, wanting to know if I would, take on this gig. And it's like, they're doing, in the summertime, they're doing 4 nights a week, I believe. Yeah, it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or maybe it was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, I think is what it was. I think they were doing a DJ on Thursday night, which I'm not sure was even paid. But they were paying, I think, $300 a night. Or something like that, or $250 a night. It was somewhere in that ballpark. We really never got the concrete numbers because it wasn't something that I was interested in doing, at least not at this point in my life. Maybe in 10 years, I may be interested in that because I absolutely love the beach and would love to work in a beach bar at some point, but I'd have to take a $100,000 a year pay cut to take the gig, and it's like, I'm just not doing it. So you do the math, and it's like, okay, so they do 3, 6, 9, 12. You're making $1,200 gross, a week. But there's a lot to deal with in being a house guy. You got to deal with whatever Yahoo band they hire. One night you'll have real professionals that are a joy to work with. The next night you'll have a bunch of Yahoos that are locals and don't know what the hell they even want in their monitor, and have no idea what an in-ear monitor is, and don't know how to sing into a mic. And there's a lot of buckshot in being a house guy. So that 300 a night, you're really going to earn that, trust me. And the people who did the install in this club really put the wrong gear in the club, so the system's a little touchy. You got to really know what you're doing, to keep the system under control. And which wouldn't have been a problem for me, but again, it just wasn't something I was, that was appealing to me. But you're looking at $1,200 gross. Uncle Sam's going to take 30% of that, so whatever that is, you're what, $800 or something at that point, or whatever, $850, somewhere in that ballpark a week. Well, I mean, the reality of that is you could probably get any number of blue collar jobs and make that per week net, or any, like a cybersecurity job or an IT job, or anything like that, and make that without all that stress. I always tell you guys, man, examine the quality of your life. I mean, if you're not happy with what you do, you can be stung with the bug of pro audio until the cows come home. But this business will hold you under the water and try to drown you in bull butter and drama every chance it gets. Excuse me. And there comes a point where sometimes you ask yourself, is it even worthwhile to do this? So only the strong survive in this business. I know tons and tons of guys that have come into this business, man, with just high hopes and ambition out the rear end, and even with money, come from wealthy families and even have a bunch of money, and just blow tens of thousands of dollars trying to get up and going and get things, moving in the right direction, just to, be 5 years in and say, you know what, I think I'm going to go back to college for cybersecurity, or go to work at Amazon, or go to work, at any warehouse up and down your local interstate, so it's a lot to be said for that. So, that house gig would have been okay. I mean, that probably would have been the minimum I would have taken. Had we been at like $1,500 a week, I might have been a little more motivated to do something there. I could have always put staff in there and just rotated down there whenever I didn't have business back here, because this venue is also 4 hours away from where I live. So there's that whole thing, because then you're going to have to find some place to live while you're down there, because the club's not going to provide that. So now your $1,200-$1,500 a week don't look so hot, does it? Because one of those weeks you're probably going to blow in rent, if you're lucky, $1,200-$1,500 for a little apartment somewhere around the beach, especially during the summer months. That's going to have its own challenges, guys. It just really is. You're probably going to have to live 30 minutes away somewhere outside the beach community in order to, make that a viable option. But those are all things you got to take into consideration. Not to mention, if I was to take a gig like that, then I have to walk away from my whole client base that I have spent, the last 30-some years building, to go do a beach club gig that no one really cares about. I mean, it's the truth, I mean, people are there on vacation and they see it. I mean, no one's there to see you, they're there to see the band. So, it just kind of is what it is. It's much, much more blue collar than people think it is. People get lost in this romantic idea of working in pro audio, like they're going to be, behind a console for, Aerosmith or something, who just quit touring, so it could never be Aerosmith. But you know what I'm saying, the Foo Fighters or any number of rock bands, with 10,000 people around them, and never have to move gear, never have to break a sweat and all that kind of stuff. And that's just not the reality of this business. And you need to remember all that stuff when you're talking to people about money, because it's a real pain in the rear end. There is a whole different conversation to be had when I'm bringing sound equipment and a light rig and all that kind of jazz to the table, because now the numbers are radically different, because now I'm showing up in a $70,000 truck, pulling a, $8,000 trailer loaded with 70, 80 grand worth of gear to load into your club. And, there's bands every day that think you should be working for $300 or $400 a night. Make sense of that for me somehow, because I can't make heads or tails out of it, I just can't. I cannot make heads or tails out of it. It's like, go rent the gear. Rental prices are 10% of retail on the gear. So conservatively, if you bring 50 grand worth of gear to the table, what's that rental price? 10%? Think about that. You know what I mean? And then you're expecting the guy to show up for, you know, $300-400 a night. I don't. That's not where I'm at, unless I'm doing somebody a favor or I owe someone a favor or, we've made some kind of deal to get events someplace else, or if I'm really super trying to earn your business, one or the other. But those aren't numbers that are relevant in my world anymore. They're just not. Now, there's a bunch of guys that will work for that, but remember, you always get what you pay for, and their systems may stop working in the middle of the show, or, there's a number of things that can happen there. But you get what you pay for. So that's kind of my take, guys. That's kind of my take on the whole idea of working for a band cut. It's not appealing to me unless the band is making super big money. Look, if a band comes to me and says, "Hey, look, we're all making $500, $550 a night. Can you work for $550 a night?" They supply all the gear, and I'm basically just being the production manager, front of house engineer, and got a tech who's being paid separately from me. Okay, maybe I would entertain that if you got 160 gigs a year, 180 gigs a year. Maybe we can talk. But even with those numbers, and this is the mistake that everybody makes, man. When you hear big numbers, you immediately think, "Oh my gosh, I got to jump on this." You don't stop long enough to count the cost. The Bible says count the cost in everything, and I'm a big proponent of that. So I kind of let the tape play in my mind of what it's going to take to actually execute that gig. And if I got to pay for hotels and meals for my crew and fuel and vehicle maintenance and, all that, if those are all factored into my stuff, that's going to be reflected in the price. I really get the impression that most bands are just looking for a sucker. Someone who is so in love with working in the music business or working around a cool band that they take advantage of that and take advantage of the person who is in that role. And then that person, is the one kind of holding the bag. He goes in, enjoys the party for the first 6 months or a year. And then he wakes up one day and realizes they ain't hardly making any money at any of this. And he's put his entire life on hold for the last 6 months or a year because all he's doing is gigging with this band, and he's never home. He hasn't seen his friends in months. Like, looks good on social media, that you're all over, your beach's hottest clubs and, playing in front of, thousands of people regularly and playing for a band that sells out every weekend, everywhere they play. Yeah, that all looks good on the surface. But look, in my world, we measure success by dollars in the bank. So when all the overhead is done, when all the expenses are done, what is left? Because that's what you're really working for. You got to treat it the same way you would if you were entertaining a job offer for somebody in an office building or on a construction site or whatever your trade is. You got to ask yourself all those same questions. What's it going to cost to get back and forth? What's the commute going to be like? Are these people going to be jerks to work for all the time? That's a big thing for me. Like, my clients know that I give better prices to people who aren't jerks. They get the "you're not an asshole" discount, That has value in my world, So if I'm entertaining a job outside the music business, I ask myself a variety of questions of what it's going to take to do that job. Is it going to be something that I can enjoy or at least tolerate? Is it something that's not going to physically break me? Because believe me, there's a lot of manual labor in the music business, moving gear and stuff like that, and it will break you. I have a torn meniscus in my left knee right now and been fighting plantar fasciitis in my right heel. So I've had it in both legs, and just found out I got arthritis in both knees. Joy! It's so much fun getting old and being in the music business, and I have absolutely no choice. They want to operate it on my knee. I've got to wait until after Halloween. This video is being recorded the last week of August. So I've got to limp around for the next 2 months because these 2 months are absolutely insane and busy in order to keep things where they need to be and not put me down for the count. So, we're maybe going to do the surgery the first week of November, or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Those are all the things you got to take into account when you're in this business. There's a lot more to this than physically than there would be if you were sitting in a cubicle somewhere in front of a computer all day. Maybe in your world that's a living hell, because in my world that would be a living hell. I'm not an office guy. I'm not a corporate office. I can't deal with that stuff. I'm a blue collar guy. I like to be outside. I like to get my hands dirty. I like to be right in the midst of what is going on. So those are all things you got to ask yourself, and all things you got to weigh out when you're trying to decide whether or not you're going to work for this amount of money or that amount of money or what have you. I'll see y'all next time.